An Apache woman was kidnapped, but the man at the fence was a legend. The Apache village lay quietly in a wide valley surrounded by rolling hills and stretches of desert. The sun rose slowly over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air was still, carrying the scent of wild grass and earth warmed by the morning sun. In this village, life moved at its own pace. People worked hard, yet there was a rhythm, a calmness, and a sense of unity that connected everyone. Children's laughter rang out from between the adobe homes, and the elders sat outside, sharing stories of their ancestors and the land they loved so deeply. Among the villagers lived a young woman named Naya. She was known for her bright spirit, her clever mind, and her unshakable courage. Her long black hair often caught the sunlight as she moved, and her eyes held the depth of someone who had seen both beauty and hardship in life. Naya's days were filled with small but important tasks. She helped her family tend their small crops, gathered herbs from the surrounding hills, and cared for a few goats that wandered freely around the village. She had a way of moving quietly, observing everything, and understanding the subtle signs of the world around her. On this particular morning, Naya set out to the river with 2 large jars in her hands. The water was crucial for the village. It was used for cooking, cleaning, and for the small garden her family maintained near their home. The path to the river was familiar to her. She had walked it countless times, noticing the flowers that bloomed along the edges, the way the wind moved through the tall grass, and the occasional footprints of animals crossing the sand. She enjoyed these moments of calm, when it felt like the entire world was hers to observe, even if only for a few minutes. As Naya approached the riverbank, she noticed the sunlight dancing on the water's surface. The reflection shimmered, almost like 1,000 tiny stars, and for a moment she paused to enjoy the beauty. She set down her jars and knelt to fill them, humming softly to herself. The sound of water trickling into the jars was soothing, and for a while she felt completely at peace. She did not notice the shadows moving quickly behind the distant rocks. Before she could react, strong hands grabbed her. She tried to pull away, but the men were fast, skilled, and determined. They threw a cloth over her face, making it hard to breathe or see clearly. The world became a blur of fear, confusion, and the pounding of her own heart. Naya struggled, calling out silently, hoping someone would hear her, but the sound of the river and the wind masked her cries. She could feel herself being lifted and pushed onto a horse. The ride was rough, the horse moving swiftly over the uneven terrain, and every jolt made her fear grow. Back in the village, Naya's sudden disappearance was quickly noticed. Her mother had been waiting for her return with lunch prepared and a small smile on her face, expecting Naya to appear any moment. When she saw the empty path and the overturned jars by the river, panic set in immediately. The villagers gathered, fear and confusion etched into their faces. No one had ever seen anything like this happen before. Mothers held their children closer, elders murmured prayers, and the men tried to form a plan. But the desert was wide, and the kidnappers could have gone anywhere. Among those most affected was Naya's younger brother, Tay. He had always looked up to his sister, admiring her bravery and cleverness. Seeing her taken brought a sharp pain to his chest and a fire of determination in his heart. He refused to let fear paralyze him. "We must find her," he said, his voice steady but urgent. The elders listened, their faces lined with worry, knowing that the desert could hide many dangers. They reminded Tay that rushing in without a plan could make things worse, but he would not be discouraged. He knew he had to act, even if it meant facing the unknown. The village elders called for a meeting to decide what to do. They gathered under the large oak tree in the center of the village, where they had held councils for generations. Everyone spoke in hushed tones, debating the best course of action. Some suggested sending a group of men immediately to track the kidnappers, while others warned that it could be a trap. Stories were shared of bandits who had passed through the lands before, but no one had seen such brazen behavior in years. Nea's disappearance had shaken everyone to the core. Meanwhile, Nea herself was trying to stay calm. She had learned to observe people, to notice small details, and to think quickly under pressure. The men who had taken her did not seem careless. They were precise, organized, and determined. Nea noted their movements, the way they spoke to each other, and the landmarks they passed. She memorized every hill, every unusual rock formation, and even the way the wind shifted through the canyons. Her mind worked like a map, storing every detail that might help her or someone else find a way to rescue her. The journey with her captors was long and exhausting. The sun blazed overhead and the horses' hooves kicked up clouds of dust. Nea's arms ached from holding herself steady and her throat was dry. She thought of her family, her home, and the life she had always known. She refused to give in to despair. Instead, she focused on the little things, listening to the sounds around her, predicting the movements of her captors, and imagining ways to leave clues that might be noticed by someone tracking them. Back at the village, the search party began its work. Small groups of men and women spread out, combing the surrounding desert, following every possible trail. They moved slowly but carefully, knowing that one misstep could ruin any chance of finding Nea. They carried water and supplies, calling out her name as they went, hoping for even the faintest sign of her presence. As the hours passed, frustration and fear began to settle in. The desert was unforgiving, and the trail seemed to vanish as quickly as it appeared. Despite the growing anxiety, Tay refused to give up. He remembered stories of a man who lived alone at the fence marking the edge of the Apache lands. This man was known as a legend among the people, feared by enemies and respected by the village. He had skills that seemed almost impossible, and it was said that he could find anyone, no matter how well hidden. Some villagers dismissed these tales as exaggerations, but Tay held on to hope. He decided that if anyone could help save his sister, it was this man. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in golden and purple hues, the village prepared for a long night. Fires were lit, and prayers were whispered into the air, carrying hope and determination. Nea's mother wept quietly, holding her youngest child close, while Tay made a silent promise to himself that he would do everything in his power to bring his sister back safely. He knew the journey ahead would be dangerous, but courage and love gave him strength. Even though fear and uncertainty filled the village, Nea's presence was felt in every corner. The children spoke her name, the elders remembered her laughter, and her family clung to the hope that she was still alive, waiting for someone to find her. The bond between the villagers grew stronger, their shared concern uniting them in a way that made them even more determined to protect one of their own. And so, the first chapter of Nea's ordeal came to an end, not with answers, but with a resolve to act. In the quiet desert night, beneath the stars, the seeds of courage and legend were beginning to grow. One young woman had been taken, but the story of her strength, her family's determination, and the mysterious man who might come to help was just beginning to unfold. The desert air was cooler in the morning, but the sun still rose bright and unrelenting over the village. The people had spent the night filled with worry, but sleep had been uneasy, heavy with fear for Nea. Her sudden disappearance had shaken everyone, but there was also a spark of determination in the hearts of those who loved her. Tay woke early, the first light brushing across the earth, and he immediately set to preparing for the day ahead. He could not sit idly while his sister remained in danger. The elders of the village had gathered again under the large oak tree in the center of the village, discussing their next steps. They spoke in quiet, deliberate voices, weighing the risks and possibilities. Some insisted that waiting for reinforcements from neighboring villages might be wiser, as the desert was vast and the kidnappers could be anywhere. Others argued that every minute counted and that immediate action was essential. Tay listened intently, absorbing every word, though his mind had already settled on a plan. He remembered the stories his father had told him as a boy, tales of a man who lived at the fence marking the border of their territory. This man, whose name had been spoken with reverence and awe, was said to be unmatched in skill, able to track anyone, survive any danger, and confront enemies without fear. The elders often mentioned him as a legend, someone who had protected the village in times of great peril, though very few had ever seen him. Tay knew the desert held many dangers, but he also knew that if there was any hope of finding Nea, it lay in the hands of this man. With the elders' reluctant approval, Tay gathered his supplies. He packed a small bag with water, dried meat, a blanket, and a few tools that might help him navigate the desert. Though he was young and not as experienced as the elders, his determination burned brighter than any fear. He promised himself that he would find Nea, no matter the obstacles, and bring her back safely. The village watched as he set out, some silently praying, others whispering words of encouragement. The journey toward the fence was not an easy one. The desert stretched endlessly, its golden sands shimmering under the sun. Small hills and rocky outcrops broke the monotony, but each step was taxing on Tay's legs and spirit. He moved carefully, paying attention to the land as he had been taught. He observed the patterns of the wind on the sand, the way small animals left their tracks, and even the distant cries of birds that flew high above. Every detail mattered, for the desert was both a guide and a challenge, capable of hiding dangers as well as clues. As Tay traveled, he thought about his sister. Nea had always been strong and clever, never one to give in to fear. He imagined her watching the world around her, noticing every detail of the land and of the people who had taken her. The thought that she might be leaving small signs for someone to follow gave him hope. He imagined her silently marking a trail with broken twigs or displaced stones, waiting for the right eyes to notice them. That thought strengthened him, making his pace steadier and his resolve firmer. Along the way, Tay encountered small signs of life in the desert. A rabbit darted across his path, leaving tiny tracks behind. A fox disappeared into the rocks, and a pair of hawks circled high above, calling to each other. Each sight reminded him of the delicate balance of the land and the patience required to survive within it. He knew that tracking someone, or something, was not simply a matter of following visible footprints. It required understanding the language of the desert itself, reading the signs that others might overlook. By midday, the sun blazed directly overhead, and Tay sought shade under a lone acacia tree. He drank water slowly, careful not to waste a single drop, and ate a small portion of dried meat. His mind wandered briefly to his village, to his mother and younger siblings, and to the warmth of home. The thought of returning with Nea safely in his arms gave him strength beyond what he believed possible. Each step forward was not just a journey through the desert, it was a step toward hope, toward family, and toward justice for what had happened. As he neared the edge of the territory, the landscape began to change. The sand grew thinner and the rocks became larger and more jagged. The fence, a boundary marking the edge of Apache lands, was said to stand somewhere ahead, though Tay could not see it yet. He moved cautiously, alert to every sound and every movement. His heart beat faster with each passing hour, but he forced himself to stay calm. Panic would only make him careless, and in the desert, carelessness could be deadly. Finally, as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Tay saw a small cabin in the distance, smoke curling gently from its chimney. He approached carefully, unsure if this was the place he had been seeking. From stories, he knew that the man at the fence was cautious, wary of strangers, and unlikely to welcome an unexpected visitor lightly. He slowed his pace, making sure his steps were soft and deliberate. Every instinct he had learned from his village guided him forward. When Tay reached the cabin, he found a man tending a small fire outside. The man was tall and strong, his face weathered but calm. His eyes held a quiet intensity, a sharpness that seemed to see far beyond the present moment. Tay felt a mixture of awe and relief. This was the man from the stories, the one who had protected the village and earned a reputation as a legend. Gathering his courage, Tay stepped forward and spoke, explaining who he was and why he had come. At first the man listened silently, his expression unreadable. He asked few questions, and his calm presence seemed to weigh on Tay, making him feel both small and determined. Tay described Naya's kidnapping, the desert trail, and the urgency of the situation. He spoke with honesty and fear, letting every emotion show in his words. The man did not respond immediately. He merely watched, his eyes observing Tay as if measuring his courage and resolve. Finally, the man nodded slightly. "I will help," he said, his voice low but firm. "But you must understand, this will not be easy. The desert will test us. The ones who took your sister are not careless. Every step we take must be deliberate. You must be ready to face danger, but if you are careful, we can find her." Tay felt a surge of relief and hope. The man gathered his gear, a saddle for his horse, tools for survival, and other items that Tay could not immediately recognize, and prepared to set out at first light. That night, as the stars appeared over the desert, Tay and the man sat near the fire. The man told stories of the land, of tracking through the harshest conditions, and of encounters he had survived that few could imagine. Tay listened intently, absorbing every lesson, every word of advice. He realized that finding Naya would require more than courage. It would require patience, observation, and understanding the subtle signs of life in the desert. The man was not just a protector, he was a teacher, and Tay knew he was learning skills that might save his sister's life. Throughout the night, Tay thought of Naya. He imagined her using her intelligence and courage to stay safe, to notice every small detail, and to leave clues for anyone brave enough to follow. The thought of her fighting quietly, using her mind as well as her strength, gave him determination. He could almost feel her presence guiding them through the darkness, making each step meaningful. Sleep came lightly to him, brief moments of rest punctuated by dreams of the journey ahead and the hope of a reunion. When dawn broke, the desert was bathed in a soft golden light. Tay and the man at the fence mounted their horses and set out, following the faint trails left by the kidnappers. The landscape shifted under the sun, revealing new paths, obstacles, and clues. Every moment required focus, every step demanded patience, and every choice could change the outcome. Tay felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. He was no longer just a frightened brother. He was a determined seeker, guided by courage, skill, and hope. And so the search for Naya truly began. The journey was uncertain, the dangers were many, but the bond between the young man and the legendary protector gave strength to both. In the wide expanse of the desert under the vast sky, a story of bravery, intelligence, and resilience was unfolding. One step, one clue, and one heartbeat at a time. The sun had just risen over the desert, casting long golden shadows across the rocky hills. Tay rode beside the man from the fence, whose name was Jaron. The wind was warm, carrying the scent of dry grass and sand. For miles, the desert stretched endlessly, dotted with low shrubs, scattered boulders, and distant mountains. The silence of the early morning was comforting in a way, but it also reminded Tay of the danger surrounding them. Every movement in the distance, every sound carried meaning. This journey was unlike anything he had ever faced before. Jaron rode with a calm, steady pace, his eyes scanning the horizon. His presence was powerful but quiet, and Tay could not help but feel both awe and respect for the man. Jaron had the air of someone who understood the desert as no one else could. He could read the smallest changes in the land, the shifting of sand dunes, the subtle marks left by animals, and even the faint disturbances that humans made while walking. To Tay, it was as if Geron could see a story hidden in every footprint, every bent branch, and every broken stone. As they rode, Tay asked Geron about his past, about why he lived so far from the village and why he had become a legend. Geron's eyes softened slightly, and he spoke with quiet authority. "I have spent many years learning the desert," he said. "I have walked its paths alone, survived its storms, and faced dangers that most people cannot imagine. People call me a legend, but I only know the land and I know how to see what others miss. That is all." Tay listened, absorbing every word. He could sense the truth in Geron's voice. This was a man whose knowledge and skills had been earned through years of experience, not through stories or exaggeration. The way Geron moved his hands over the reins, the way his eyes followed the smallest detail, and the calmness with which he approached every obstacle, everything showed that he was capable of extraordinary things. Tay felt a mixture of fear and hope. With Geron's guidance, they might truly be able to find Nea. The journey took them over rocky hills and across narrow passes, where the desert opened up into wide valleys. Geron taught Tay how to observe more than just footprints. He showed him how to notice broken twigs, slight depressions in the sand, and even the patterns of insects moving across the ground. "The desert speaks," Geron said quietly. "You must learn to listen." Tay tried to follow his instructions carefully, realizing that survival and tracking required more than courage. It required patience, observation, and intelligence. As the day wore on, Geron explained how the kidnappers might think they were clever, but no one could completely hide in the desert if someone truly knew how to track them. He spoke of wind patterns, water sources, and the habits of humans under pressure. Tay absorbed every detail, realizing that the desert was not just a harsh landscape. It was a living map, full of signs and secrets waiting to be read. Each lesson Geron shared was a step closer to finding his sister. By late afternoon, they reached a small plateau overlooking a wide expanse of desert. Geron stopped, and Tay dismounted his horse, following the man's lead. From this vantage point, they could see the sun beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the dunes and rocks. Geron squinted, studying the terrain with careful attention. "Do you see anything unusual?" he asked. Tay shook his head, unsure of what to look for. Geron pointed out faint tracks in the sand, marks that Tay might have overlooked entirely. "These tracks are fresh," Geron said. "They are moving in a steady direction, but notice the pattern. They are cautious, aware. Whoever left these tracks is experienced, but they have left a trail. We can follow it." Tay felt a surge of hope. Nea's captors were not invisible. They had left signs, and Geron could read them. As they followed the tracks, the desert began to show more subtle clues. A bent branch here, a disturbed rock there, and the faint scent of smoke from a distant fire. Each detail confirmed that they were on the right path. Geron explained that the desert was unforgiving, and even small mistakes could be dangerous. "Patience is your greatest weapon," he said. "Rushing will lead to mistakes. Observe, think, and act carefully." Tay nodded, understanding that this was not just a test of speed, but a test of wisdom and patience. By evening, they came to a narrow canyon. The sun was low, casting deep shadows that made the rocks look like they were moving. Geron dismounted his horse and led Tay on foot, showing him how to move quietly and leave no trace of their presence. Every step was deliberate, every movement calculated. Tay began to understand why Geron was considered a legend. This was not about strength alone. It was about knowledge, skill, and a deep connection with the land. As night fell, they made camp in a small, hidden alcove. Geron built a fire and spoke of the importance of resting, of conserving energy and staying alert at the same time. "The desert changes at night," he said. "Animals move, temperatures drop, and the tracks we follow can become harder to see. We must be ready for anything." Tay listened closely, feeling both the weight of responsibility and the determination to succeed. Nea's safety depended on their actions, and he felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. During the night, the stars filled the sky, shining brightly above the quiet desert. Geron spoke softly about the lessons he had learned over the years, lessons of patience, courage, and respect for the land. Tay realized that this journey was as much about learning and growing as it was about rescuing his sister. Each story, each instruction, each observation was shaping him into someone capable of facing challenges he had never imagined. As the first light of dawn appeared, they prepared to move again. Geron's horse was ready, supplies were checked, and Tay felt a mix of fear and excitement. The desert stretched out before them, vast and unpredictable, but they were no longer alone. Geron's presence gave Tay confidence. Together, they would follow the tracks, interpret the signs, and move carefully toward Nea. The day unfolded with the same careful rhythm. They followed faint tracks across dunes, navigated rocky passes, and interpreted small signs that most people would have missed. Geron continued to teach Tay how to read the land, how to predict the movements of their captors, and how to remain calm under pressure. Tay felt himself growing stronger, more capable, and more connected to the desert with every step. By late afternoon, they reached a point where the tracks split. Geron studied them carefully, pointing out subtle differences in the sand and suggesting which path was more likely to lead to Nea. Tay watched closely, realizing that the desert was full of choices, and each choice could mean life or death. Geron's calm confidence gave him courage. He followed the path Geron indicated, trusting his judgment completely. As they continued, they spotted distant signs of smoke rising from behind a ridge. Geron motioned for Tay to remain quiet and cautious. "We are getting closer," he said, "but we must not rush. Patience will guide us to her safely." Tay's heart raced. The thought that Nea was nearby, that they could soon see her, filled him with hope and determination. He knew that their careful approach was crucial, and that every observation, every decision mattered. The night fell again, and they camped in a small, hidden area, staying close to the tracks. Geron spoke of the importance of observation and rest, of listening to the desert and letting it guide them. Tay realized that he had never truly understood the desert before. It was not just sand and rocks. It was a living landscape full of clues, life, and hidden paths. Every rustle, every shadow, every track was a message waiting to be read. By the end of the second night, Tay felt a mix of exhaustion and determination. He had learned so much in just 2 days, lessons of survival, patience, courage, and careful observation. But most importantly, he had gained hope. With Geron by his side, he believed they could find Nea. The desert was vast and challenging, but they had the skills, the knowledge, and the courage to face whatever lay ahead. And so, as the third day of their journey began, Tay and Geron moved forward with renewed purpose. The legendary man at the fence was no longer a distant figure. He was beside Tay, guiding him, teaching him, and leading them both toward Nea. Every step brought them closer, every careful observation revealed new signs, and every moment strengthened the bond between the young brother and the man who had become his mentor. The desert was still full of uncertainty, but the path was clearer now. The journey was far from over and challenges awaited, but with patience, skill, and courage, Tay and Geron were ready to face them. Nea was out there, somewhere waiting, and they were determined to bring her home safely. The desert sun rose slowly over the horizon, spilling warm light across the rocky hills and endless sands. Tay and Geron mounted their horses, ready to continue their journey. The night had been long, but the lessons Geron had shared had strengthened Tay in ways he could not yet fully understand. His muscles ached from walking and climbing in the rough terrain, but his mind was alert, and his heart was filled with determination. Nea was out there somewhere, and each step they took brought them closer to her. Jaron led the way, moving with a calm precision that seemed almost magical. He scanned the ground, noticing the faintest disturbances in the sand, the subtle bends in the small shrubs, and even the tracks of birds that had passed through the area. Tay followed closely, trying to see the world as Jaron did, learning to observe not just with his eyes but with his mind. Every detail mattered, every small sign could lead them to Nea, and Tay understood that patience was just as important as courage. They followed the tracks of the kidnappers across dunes and rocky passes. The footprints were faint, but Jaron knew how to interpret them. "See here," he said, pointing to a mark in the sand. "They are moving cautiously. They know someone might be following. But notice the rhythm of their steps, slightly uneven. They are tired. That is our chance to catch up." Tay nodded, feeling both excitement and anxiety. Every moment brought them closer to Nea, but it also reminded him of the danger she might be in. The journey was long and exhausting. The sun climbed high into the sky, its heat beating down on them and the horses. Jaron taught Tay how to conserve energy, how to ride efficiently, and how to keep the horses calm. "They are as important as we are," Jaron said. "If we tire them, we cannot continue. Respect the land, respect the animals, and respect the path." Tay realized that every step in the desert required thought, care, and respect for everything around them. As they moved through a narrow canyon, Jaron paused. He knelt, brushing his fingers across the sand. "These tracks," he said, "they split here. One path goes to the left and one goes to the right. We must choose carefully." Tay studied the tracks, trying to understand the subtle differences. Jaron explained how the direction of the footprints, the weight of each step, and the pressure on the sand could reveal the correct path. Tay listened carefully, absorbing every detail, knowing that their decision could make the difference between finding Nea and losing her. They chose the path to the left, following the trail across a wide valley where the sand shimmered under the hot sun. The heat was relentless, and Tay felt the sweat dripping down his face. Jaron moved steadily, his calm presence guiding Tay through the exhaustion. "Do not rush," Jaron reminded him. "The desert is not our enemy if we respect it. Hurry, and we will lose our way." Tay took a deep breath, slowing his pace, and felt a strange sense of peace despite the urgency of the situation. By mid-afternoon, they spotted signs that the kidnappers had rested recently. Broken branches, small patches of disturbed sand, and the faint scent of smoke indicated that they had stopped to eat or drink. Jaron studied the signs carefully. "They are cautious but human," he said. "They must be tired. That is why they made mistakes, leaving these signs. We can follow them, but we must stay quiet and patient." Tay realized that Nea's captors were clever, but even clever people could not escape careful observation and knowledge of the land. As they continued, the desert revealed more subtle clues. A bird's call indicated the direction of water nearby. A small pile of stones suggested a marker left by the kidnappers, and the bend of a bush showed the path they had taken. Tay marveled at Jaron's skill, realizing that the desert was not just a place of sand and rocks but a living guide, full of signs and lessons for those who could see. Every observation brought them closer to Nea and strengthened Tay's resolve. Late in the afternoon, they approached a rocky ridge. From the top, they could see a small camp in the distance. Smoke rose faintly into the sky, and the figures of people moved near a small fire. Jaron stopped and motioned for Tay to dismount. "We are close," he said quietly. "But we must approach carefully. Observe first, move later. The safety of your sister depends on patience." Tay felt his heart race. He had imagined this moment countless times, but seeing it in reality was different. The kidnappers were near, and Nea could be just a few steps away. Jaron taught Tay how to approach the camp without being noticed. They moved slowly, using the rocks and shadows as cover. Tay noticed how Jaron's movements were precise, almost invisible. Every step left minimal traces, every sound was controlled. Tay followed as best he could, learning to move silently and observe everything. "Do not focus only on what you want to see," Geron whispered. "Notice everything, the people, the fire, the animals, even the wind. The desert speaks to those who listen." As they crept closer, Tay caught glimpses of Naya. She was sitting quietly near the campfire, her head lowered but her eyes alert. She had noticed them too, leaving small signs, a broken twig, a disturbed stone, to indicate her position to anyone searching for her. Tay's heart leapt. She was alive, aware, and resourceful. The thought that she had been clever and brave throughout this ordeal filled him with pride and hope. Geron studied the camp carefully, noting the positions of the kidnappers, the layout of the tents, and the escape routes. He explained to Tay how to approach strategically, how to stay safe, and how to ensure Naya could be freed without confrontation. "Patience and intelligence," he said, "that is how we succeed. Strength alone is not enough." Tay realized that Geron's wisdom was as important as his skill, and he felt grateful for the guidance that had brought them this far. As night fell, the desert became cooler, and the shadows deepened. Geron and Tay took cover nearby, planning the final approach. Tay watched Naya from a distance, feeling a mixture of relief and nervousness. Every movement, every sound mattered. Geron explained that the desert was quiet at night, but sounds carried far. They had to move carefully, using the darkness to their advantage. Tay nodded, understanding the importance of timing and strategy. The final stretch of the journey required them to rely on everything they had learned, the observations of the day, the subtle signs left by Naya, and Geron's legendary skills. Tay felt a mix of fear and excitement, knowing that they were close to rescuing his sister. He thought of the lessons, the patience, and the courage it had taken to reach this point. The desert had tested them in every way, but they had endured. Finally, they prepared to move in. Geron whispered instructions to Tay, reminding him to stay calm, observe, and follow his lead. Every step was deliberate, every movement calculated. The campfire flickered in the distance, and Tay knew that Naya's safety depended on their careful approach. He felt a surge of determination, knowing that they were moments away from reuniting with her. And so, the pursuit reached its climax. After days of careful tracking, observation, and learning from the desert, Tay and Geron were finally in sight of Naya. The desert, once a vast and empty landscape, had become a guide, a teacher, and a path toward hope. The journey was far from over, but the careful approach, the lessons learned, and the courage of both brother and mentor had brought them to the edge of success. The night air carried the scent of smoke, the sound of distant animals, and the faint murmur of human voices. Tay and Geron moved forward, ready to bring Naya home. Every step was filled with suspense, every moment with hope. The desert had tested them, but it had also prepared them for this moment. The moment when courage, intelligence, and patience would be rewarded. The night was quiet, with only the faint whisper of the desert wind and the distant calls of nocturnal animals. Tay and Geron crouched behind a small ridge, carefully observing the camp where Naya had been held. The fire flickered softly, casting long shadows that danced across the rocks and sand. Every detail mattered: the position of the kidnappers, the arrangement of their belongings, and the signs Naya had left. Tay's heart pounded, a mixture of fear, hope, and determination coursing through him. He could see his sister just a few steps away, and yet the distance seemed to stretch endlessly under the quiet night sky. Geron turned to Tay, his calm eyes filled with focus. "Remember what we have learned," he said quietly. "Patience, observation, and timing are more important than speed or strength. We cannot afford mistakes. One wrong move and your sister's safety could be in danger." Tay nodded, gripping the reins of his horse tightly. He felt both nervous and ready. This was the moment they had been working toward for days, the moment when courage, skill, and careful planning would meet. Geron moved first, signaling Tay to follow. They approached the camp quietly, stepping over rocks and using shadows as cover. Tay followed closely, trying to mimic Geron's calm, deliberate movements. Every small sound, every shift in the sand was noticed. The kidnappers were unaware of their presence, focused on the fire and their conversation. Tay's breath came in controlled, measured bursts. He knew that patience would be their greatest ally, and rushing would only ruin everything. As they drew closer, Tay could see Nea's face clearly. She had remained alert, observing the surroundings and leaving subtle signs to guide her rescuers. She had been clever, resourceful, and strong throughout her ordeal. The sight of her, alive and aware, filled Tay with a wave of relief and determination. He realized that her courage had been just as important as Geron's skill and his own determination. Together, they had a chance to succeed. Geron motioned for Tay to stay low while he moved slightly closer to create a distraction. He picked up a small rock and tossed it carefully so it would land near a distant bush. The sound was faint but noticeable enough to draw one of the kidnappers away from the fire. The man rose cautiously and walked toward the noise, leaving the immediate area around Nea less guarded. Tay's heart pounded, but he remained still, trusting Geron's plan completely. With the kidnappers momentarily distracted, Geron moved swiftly to Nea. His steps were precise, silent, and deliberate. He reached her side and gently took her arm. Nea's eyes widened for a moment, recognizing the legendary man she had heard about in stories, the one who had come to save her. She nodded slightly, understanding that this was her chance. Geron whispered instructions, guiding her carefully away from the fire and toward the shadows. Tay followed closely, keeping his horse calm and staying alert. The desert seemed to hold its breath as they moved silently across the sand, every step calculated to avoid detection. The kidnappers returned, confused by the distraction, but it was too late. Nea was already moving with Geron and Tay, guided by careful planning and the knowledge that safety depended on patience and precision. The journey away from the camp was tense but controlled. Geron led the way, reading the terrain with the same skill he had demonstrated throughout their journey. He chose paths that offered cover, avoided open spaces where they could be seen, and used the natural features of the desert to shield their movements. Nea followed closely, her trust in Geron absolute, and Tay remained vigilant, ready to act if anything went wrong. Every step brought them closer to freedom. As they moved deeper into the desert, the tension slowly began to ease. The kidnappers' camp was behind them, and the desert around them seemed quieter, more familiar. The moon rose, casting a gentle silver light over the sand and rocks. Nea's eyes reflected both relief and gratitude. She had survived, stayed calm, and used her intelligence to leave subtle signs that helped guide her rescuers. Tay felt pride in his sister and in the courage that had carried them all through such a dangerous ordeal. Geron spoke softly, explaining how to remain alert even after leaving the immediate danger. "The desert can still be tricky," he said. "We must stay together, keep watch, and continue to observe every detail. Safety comes from patience and understanding the land, not just from speed." Tay nodded, realizing that every lesson from Geron had been important. This journey had been more than a rescue. It had been a learning experience, teaching courage, observation, and careful planning. They continued moving for several hours, keeping to hidden paths and observing the environment carefully. Nea shared her experiences, explaining how she had noticed every detail of the kidnappers' movements and left small markers to guide anyone searching for her. Geron nodded approvingly, recognizing her cleverness and courage. Tay listened, amazed at his sister's resilience and quick thinking. He realized that she had been brave in ways he had not fully appreciated before, and that her strength had been crucial to their success. As dawn approached, the landscape began to change. Small hills and familiar markers from earlier in the journey appeared in the distance. The village was near, and the familiar signs of home filled them with hope. Tay's heart swelled with anticipation. They had faced the desert, followed subtle signs, and used courage and intelligence to reach this point. The reunion with their loved ones was near, and every step was guided by determination and trust. Finally, the first houses of the village came into view. Smoke from cooking fires, the laughter of children, and the familiar sounds of life welcomed them back. Tay urged his horse forward, and Naya's eyes brightened as she recognized the village. The villagers had begun to gather, watching the horizon for any signs of their return. When they saw Tay and Naya approaching, guided by Geron, relief and joy spread through the crowd. Mothers hugged their children, elders offered blessings, and everyone celebrated the courage that had brought Naya home safely. Naya and Tay dismounted, embracing each other tightly. Tears flowed freely as they held each other, the fear and tension of the past days melting away. Naya whispered words of gratitude to her brother, who had refused to give up, and to Geron, whose guidance and skill had made the rescue possible. Geron remained calm, quietly observing the reunion, his presence a reminder of the journey and the lessons learned. The villagers gathered around, listening as Tay and Naya recounted the story of the desert, the tracks, and the careful observation that had guided them. Geron spoke little, but when he did, his words were simple and full of wisdom. He reminded them that courage, patience, and intelligence were as important as strength in overcoming challenges. The villagers listened, inspired by the tale and grateful for the safe return of Naya. In the days that followed, life returned to a quiet rhythm. Naya resumed her daily tasks, tending to the garden, helping her family, and reconnecting with her friends and neighbors. But she carried with her a new understanding of the desert, of courage, and of the strength that comes from cleverness and patience. Tay felt proud of his sister and grateful for the lessons he had learned from Geron. He understood now that bravery was not just physical strength. It was the courage to think, observe, and act carefully in the face of danger. Geron quietly returned to his cabin at the fence, disappearing into the desert as mysteriously as he had appeared. The villagers spoke of him in whispers and stories, not as a distant legend, but as a real man whose courage and wisdom had saved a life. Naya, Tay, and their family never forgot the lessons learned from the journey, the importance of patience, observation, and courage, and they carried these lessons forward in their daily lives. The story of Naya's kidnapping and rescue became a tale told around fires and during gatherings, not as a story of fear, but as a story of hope, bravery, and the extraordinary power of careful thinking and courage. Children grew up listening to the tale, inspired by the cleverness and resilience of Naya, the determination of Tay, and the legendary skill of Geron. The desert, once seen as a place of danger, became a teacher, guiding those who paid attention and moved with respect and intelligence. Naya often reflected on the journey, thinking about the lessons she had learned and the strength she had discovered within herself. She knew that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act wisely despite it. She carried these lessons in her heart, ready to face whatever challenges life might bring, knowing that patience, observation, and determination could guide her through even the most difficult times. The village returned to its quiet rhythm, but the memory of the rescue remained alive in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed it. The desert had tested them all, but it had also revealed the strength, courage, and intelligence that lived within each person. Naya's safe return became a symbol of hope, and the lessons of the journey were passed down, reminding everyone that even in the face of danger, bravery and wisdom could lead to triumph. And so the story came to an end, not with fear or sorrow, but with the quiet satisfaction of a life saved, lessons learned, and courage proven. Naya, Tay, and their village thrived, carrying forward the legacy of the desert, the legendary man at the fence, and the power of patience, intelligence, and bravery.